Hello, and welcome to Imagine Wednesdays on March 3rd. So it's 3321. What an auspicious date, triple threes. I'm Arianna Mclean, a multi-genre writer and current grad student at Stony Brook University, working on an MFA in creative writing. So I want to say a big hello to the SBU family out there, and a special shout out to Mackenzie Waterson's 202 creative writing class. I've been shadowing their class as part of the teaching practicum in the graduate program, and it's been so wonderful to hear everyone's work over the last few weeks. So for today's Imagine Wednesday, I have the pleasure of introducing two amazingly talented poets who will be reading for you. We have Michelle Whittaker and Tyehimba Jess. And afterwards, we'll have some time for Q&A, so feel free to just type your questions in the YouTube chat as they arise. It won't interrupt us, and we'll try and get to as many as possible at the end. So our first reader today is Michelle Whittaker. Michelle is an alumna of Stony Brook, completing her MFA in creative writing and literature. She's a poet, a pianist, a musician, and a university instructor. Her debut poetry collection, Surge, was a finalist in the 2018 Next Generation Indie Book Awards. Her poems have been published all over, including but not limited to the New York Times Magazine, the New Yorker, Upstreet, the Southampton Review, Narrative, Vinyl, Poetry, and the Long Island Quarterly. Michelle was awarded a Jody Donahue Poetry Prize, a New York State Creative Arts Artist Fellowship, a Cave Kenham Fellowship. Michelle is currently an assistant professor in the program of writing and rhetoric at Stony Brook University, where her interests include expository and creative writing pedagogy, music composition, 20th century American poetry, and eco-poetics. So let's give it up for Michelle. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here today, and it seems like the start of spring and the exit of winter. So sometimes when there is a shift in season like this, I don't know, I get in the mood for certain types of poems. So it was hard to sort of pick what to read today. But I decided to go with some elegies. So I guess some remembrance poems. And I have about 4, and then I can't wait to hear the rest of the meeting. Okay, so the first poem is one that I usually read at most readings. It's one of my favorite poems, but it's called In the Afterlight, and is written for Jordan Davis. He's actually, or was actually, my cousin's cousin. He was murdered at a gas station for playing music too loud. And so this poem is dedicated to him. Originally, it was called The Fortune Cookie, and when you break it open, the strip inside said, "What is the speed of dark?" And so that's where it starts. In the Afterlight. What is the speed of dark? Sounds like, what is the speed of a black boy, or the speed of a stallion beauty turning corners? What about wild horses barreling down a Moroccan beach? What about this boy not foreign to me who sleeps in their path? What is the speed of dilations, or nervous systems, or involuntary, hardwired and on the fritz? What is the speed of suspension, or the permanency of no return, or saying no and meaning no? Is it like the speed of being chased down, or the speed of light, or the sly of a streaming bullet? Is it like ripping through cells? I actually wish I understood the physics, for it sounds like the speed of a bull ramming into a windowless matter, almost like the speed of a power outage or powerless and underage. For what is the speed of returning to a dark or closing and opening a wound? Is it like bagging a body? I often wonder, what is the sound of the emergent spirit? Does it sing like a lark or spike like a nightingale? The next poem is called, is for my grandmother, called Frequently Asked Answers. It has sort of puzzle form. So the second line, they're couplets. The second line sort of repeats, but I, of course, broke the rules, which I tend to do sometimes. The thought of my grandmother's death often visits the thought of Jesus, cleaned and prepared for gravity. Even the clanging of cymbals or catechisms against prayer wheels in the brain no longer lie grave. The oncologist outlining a group of disorganized nodules mirrors the grass plots for a Freeport graveyard. The thought of reticence interrupts this drinking, this dunderhead masking ovarian grief. The reality of being born again crawls in and out of bed, and certain positions seem prone to restless griping. Loving someone depressed, dying, and in self-denial deepens the daily routine for creating art. Like grievances, circling her courtyard in front of a bed of geraniums, diseased, deeming themselves mapless, almost ageless, like a luminary acquiescence, or the torment of when the virtue subsumes the bleed. It's in memory of my grandfather. I guess the only thing you might need to know is that he worked for Red Stripe Beer factory for a really long time in Jamaica. And he had always wanted to go to Paris, and he got to Paris and he died there. But he got there. So it's an unusual poem, the form. So we'll just go with it. It's just, what I ended up writing for him. It's called After the Data Settles. He is a Facebook post wearing my dead grandfather's face, eyeing me shy behind his thick black frames, no matter where we stand, an American, an African, a Panamanian, an Irish, Scot, Jamaican, spinning ices under a metal veranda, where I've not visited in the longest look at his quiet face, a repertory of revisions, an avid reader like how I imagine a clockmaker binging delicately about small inspections of allspice, popping tropical collars from under a sweater before heading to work at a D&G Red Stripe factory for decades and for decades after making his only trip to Paris. Can we have a postcard of silence? For he is now confined to a box, like a portraiture, savoring a goat's cartilage until it crumbled into an odyssey, or into who might like, dislike me, cringing about this, that, or how I wish I knew my real grandfather's face, declaring to his daughter how her daughter would be this artist mourning us all, as if we awoke as animals violated of privacy or private parts that's now gone into this madhouse that's not saying anything, but just scattering into an almost shame for me not navigating home. Oops. And the last one is a newer poem called The Body Politic. We, the field workers of the highest patron, have no memory of Adam and evermore. We, the field workers, did not choose to fall from the great tree and charted dichotomies. We, the field workers, were taught from a book that we were rustled up as grub dust and a dry rib. We, the field workers, ever bearing unrest, cannot find this option of being healed by light. We, the field workers, finger trace our skins, resonating aisles and a parched continent. We, the field workers, sporing danger and unending pain, were told this is a test. We, the workers, speak on behalf of other witnesses, gathering restlessness. The field does mind force cultivation. And we do know sometimes serpents slide us into agitated states of admonishment. Thank you so much for listening.
All right, I went ahead and unmuted myself. Thank you so much, Michelle. That was beautiful. I just wanted to share with you some of the comments in our YouTube chat. Gorgeous. Wow, beautiful. Red stripe to Paris. Sizzling. Postcard of silence. Very poignant. You write like fire. I'm inspired. I too am inspired. So thank you so much. We'll have you come back for some Q&A at the end. Our next poet is Tyehimba Jess. He is a Cave Canem and NYU alumnus. He received a 2004 Literature Fellowship from the National Endowment of the Arts. He is an author of 2 acclaimed books of poetry, Lead Belly and Olio. Olio won the 2017 Pulitzer Prize, the Anisfeld Wolf Book Award, the Midland Society Authors Award in Poetry, and received an outstanding contribution to publishing citation from the Black Caucus of the American Library Association. It was also nominated for a multitude of literary awards. Lead Belly was a winner of the 2004 National Poetry Series. The Library Journal and Black Issues Book Review named it one of the best poetry books of 2005. So Tyehimba had also received a Guggenheim Fellowship in 2018. Seriously, his accolades just go on in the best way possible. We're so lucky to have you here today. Tyehimba is currently a professor of English at the College of Staten Island. So I'm so excited to hear what you have to read for us. Let's give it up for Tyehimba Jess.
Hey, thank you for being here. Michelle, thank you for those wonderful poems. I'm thinking about Red Stripe in Paris now. That was a very endearing portrait. So thank you for your words. It's great to be here with all y'all at SBU. You know what? I'm gonna read this. I think I'll read 2 or 3. This one is well, it's I guess it's inspired by many of the protests that happened over 2020, etc. But truth be told, I've written so many poems about police violence that it's hard not to just put them on an assembly line and just change the names and the places in the poems. This is an attempt to try and do something different. American Appetite, and the epigraph is from Langston Hughes. Tomorrow, I'll be at the table when company comes. I too sat at the table of America's dream diner and raised my hand to order. What do you have? Asked the weary waitress. I would like something that tastes like justice, please. I would like the kneecaps of the officer who knelt on George Floyd's neck. I had been told that the knees were fleshy, fibrous, soaked to the bone, in the last words of George as he cried for his mother, steamed in the heat of the surrounding officers' stares as they mechanically looked away. I had heard the knee was simmered in the nonchalance of the officer's hands in pocket slouch, that it would be succulent enough to make my mouth ring with gospel. We are fresh out of kneecap, sir. That delivery has been delayed, said the waitress. I would like a substitute then, please. I would like the knuckles of the police officers who fired bullets through twilight into Breonna Taylor's startled body. I had been told that the knuckles would taste like justice, though they had been pickled in anger and homegrown in a garden of whispered epithets, that each crease on each knuckle was gunpowdered smoky, sweet with twisted law. Sorry, said the waitress. Those are not on the menu either. Okay. Well, how about some barbecued, falsely accusing officer fingers, please? I heard they were always in season and so crisp, so crackling, so well seasoned that basted in brown faced accusations, they were like savory justice. Sorry, sir. This season has been slow and those fingers are slippery hard to capture. Okay, well, how about some deep fried trigger fingers then? I like some fried 2 seconds to shoot a 12-year-old trigger fingers with a side of coercive false confession cop lips, please. Sorry, sir. Well, perhaps some 19-shot Chicago-style trigger fingers with a salad of accomplice officers and mayoral silent tongues. Well, maybe tomorrow. Okay, maybe some country-style KKK trigger fingers, the ones with Dixie flags on the knuckles and corporate ink on the fingertips. Those have never been on our menu, sir. Well, maybe some feet then. Some cop toes fresh from kicking in warrantless doors or suspect teeth. A well-heeled, well-seasoned in shouts of, "Stop resisting!" Sorry, sir. Those would be extra special order. I was running out of patience in America's dream diner. I threw my hands up in frustration. What kind of American dream diner is this anyway? Where is the napkin stitched from eyelids of cops looking desperately the other way? Where is the carafe of intoxicating white woman tears to wash down my gut-shot innocence? Where is the fork of broken ribs from death warrant signing governors? Where is the spoon carved from baton-wielding cop wrists, hardened with blows across protester heads? Where is the bowl of perjurous prosecutor's skull, rubbed stainless with its scrub of plea deal capitalization? All I wanted to do today was taste a little bit of justice. And here I am, still hungry. Sir, I have to ask you to lower your voice, said the waitress. Seriously? I see Predator Drone over there feasting on Yemeni Afghan bones, but I can't get one single cop toe? Sir, please calm. I see IMF Economic Adjustment and back feasting on senior citizens' pension plans on a platter of sweatshop hands with a whole truckload of refugee sauce. And I can't get one police knuckle. And look over there, Chevron, Exxon, Halliburton, Fracking Incorporated, over in the corner, slurping up toddler brains with a side of grandma liver on a plate of foreclosed mortgages, and I can't get one kneecap. But sir, look, maybe I'm not false flagging a foreign country rich, but I am a citizen of this country. And is this not American Dream Diner? I came here dreaming of a whiff of justice and look, sir, no, you look. There's no knock arrest over there, mouthful of molten lead with a heaping bowl of black body soup. And what's that over there? With a mouth full of George Washington's stolen slave teeth, about to slice open a fresh batch of private prison flesh. Looks like the prison. And then came the company man. Security's arm around my throat, my eyes pitched toward the ceiling, my feet flown off the ground, my head thrown to the floor. It was only then I remembered I'd never had the chance to say my grace. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can breathe. I can breathe. I can breathe. I will breathe. I will breathe. I will breathe. I will breathe. I am fire. So that was America's Dream Diner for your dining pleasure. Um, I think I got enough time. I think you know what I'm gonna run. I'm gonna read this one because it's close to our heart, and then maybe I'll read like a tiny one from the book, just a tiny one. But this is dedicated to all the men. You know, I'm gonna preface this and just say that domestic violence, of course, is a plague. Um, it should be recognized that domestic violence is not just a one-sided proposition. In other words, most of the time in cases of domestic violence, the violence is bilateral to whatever degree. And this is in lieu of a PSA, you know, this is a poem about the idea of de-escalating violence in uh, in the household when particularly men have to learn how to walk away. Blood of my blood, my father. Where would we be now if you had just walked away? Those times your fists grew tight and your father's blood screamed inside your skull for the crash of knuckle against my mother's skull. Where would we be if you had turned your back to whatever hot words boiled from my mother's mouth, from whatever insult you heard or saw in whatever slight or terrible gesture? All I know is the stitches burned across her scalp, of deadly household silence, of its ocean of unsaid seething in a hidden bloodied mouth. I know the way I've prayed that my hands would never swing the weight of our fists across my lover's face. My father, I'd wish you the patience of both hands at your side, of arms folded in front of you. I'd wish you the counting to 10 or 20 or 100 or 1,000. I'd wish you both hands up in surrender, or behind your back, or behind your head, or buried in your pockets, or blocking her fists or slaps as you back away. I'd wish you a swift retreat when you felt your father's fist rising against my mother's anger. I'd wish you a clear path to the door when you felt the world's whip on your back and her tongue in the heat of your marriage. I'd wish you a walk around the block, a fast car to squeal through streetlights, a long bus ride into the afternoon, a taxi waiting at the curbside, a bike to ride furious in the night, or just your slam of a door behind you instead of the slam of your fist to flesh. I'd wish you one friend to call, or 2 or 20, begging you to stand down, to remember what a man can lose with the stroke of one blow. Love, respect, wife, children, family, career, freedom, freedom from the label woman beater. I'd wish you the words to say, I'm leaving now before I lose it. I'd wish you the knowing when you were just about to lose it. I'd wish you shelter to find yourself before coming back home without rage. My father, I'd wish you almost anything else in the world than me standing over you years later, feeling my father's blood surging in my fists. But here we are, blood of my blood. And the only gift I can give you is that I've run from your blood in my blood when my anger rose. I've tried to kill the parts of you that took me so close to killing. My father, where would we be now if you had just walked away? What if I weren't scrambling through the years, through the rubble, to stitch together the shreds of what I wish I'd been able to tell you? I love you. Now, I'm walking away. I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much. I am, sitting back with the chills that I got from your work. Thanks for sharing. Just some notes from the audience. That was great. Wow, amazing. That was fire, beautifully performed. Pure power, visceral, internally moving, blood of my blood. That was very clever. Thunderstruck and incredible. So thank you, Tyehimba. And I guess now we can chat about poetry, life, everything. This is Imagine Wednesdays is a program aimed towards our BFA creative writing students. So I thought I'd open up the Q&A with, I guess I'll start with Tyehimba. You just spoke. When did you know that you were a poet? How did you get your start writing?
Well, I'll say, I was writing when I was about 15. And I wrote through high school, and then I went to college and tried to get an English degree, and I hated it. And it and it threw me off the path of being in poetry. You have to be a little crazy to want to be a creative writer. You have to be a little bit nuts. And everybody around you, well, I would say particularly your family, is going to be like, when you're going to get a real job. And I think that, for me, really, it's knowing you're doing it is one thing, but devoting, like understanding and recognizing and claiming it and acting on it is a different thing. And for me, that happened in my 20s after I went through, a few different jobs, and I hated working 9 to 5s, and and I, you know, I did start to notice that when I wrote, writing took 2 steps towards me, and when I did other things, the journey was twice as long. so in my mid-20s is when I really started to really claim it.
Wow. I feel you with the it's a crazy undertaking for sure. Michelle, how about you? When did you know this was for you? And I know you are also a musician and many other things. But when did you know that you were a writer?
I still don't know if I'm a writer, to be honest. I like writing. I like investigating different subject matters. I'm probably obsessive. Obsessive with certain kinds of content, I'll say. And, as a musician, and I started probably, I want to say maybe 7 or 8 years old, playing violin and then piano. And I mean, I think I played scales from when I was 7 up, and like, I didn't stop until into my 30s. And I never grew tired of hearing a scale. That's a little crazy, I think, in the most positive sense. So I'm just an obsessive listener. I like repeating music, poems. I love rereading, rediscovering. So to be fair, I just had a lot of great English teachers. I had a lot of critical music teachers. That's classical music. That's, I think, sometimes part of it, where they're usually critiquing your technique and your interpretation, right, of mostly dead composers. But I think as English teachers, they just, I don't know, they just sparked this sort of investigation into life, just allowed me to ask questions, and writing it on the page, whether it's like a diary, something private, or something, choosing whether I want to share that. So a lot of my poems lived under my couch, in my bed, like in the closet. And probably not until college, I had a few teachers say, "Are you sure you don't want to study this?" And I was a musician and like a dancer too. So I was like, nah. And then I nearly broke my leg. So, and then continued with music. And there weren't a lot of Black classical composers. So I had it in my mind, I really wanted to add to that canon. But yeah, I'm going to stop there because somebody's like knocking at the door. So, Tyehimba, you want to take it away?
Oh, I'd love to talk. Michelle was talking a little bit about sound, and I think both of you in your work have such incredible use of sound and in the language and the rhythm. I'd love to hear a little bit about maybe that process, if that's something that you're very aware of.
Yeah, I would say that when I was in college, I was a jazz DJ for about 10 years. Well, it didn't take me 10 years to matriculate. It took a long time, close to 10. But at any rate, they had a 7,000 record jazz collection, and that became a huge uh, education for me. Not to mention their blues collection. I'm talking about wax, you know. So it I guess I became intrigued at a early age about music that had been made before I was born. And I think that when you're in tune with the music, or when you're at least hip to the music that preceded your generation, you get hip to all kinds of histories that are attached to that music. You get hip to all kinds of uses of language and cultural origins that are influencing where you are right at that moment. So, I mean, to me, the music is indispensable, and I would only add that you have to remember that in Black folks were not allowed to read or write or or speak in their native language from the continent on this country upon pain of death, or even to play drums. So, but the music that we did retain carried all that energy from the continent, and it also carried our stories along the way through generation after generation of African folks working under slavery, and so part of African American literature is the music. There's just no there's a continuum from one to the other, right? Even when you listen to sermons preached in the Baptist church, they bring the cadence, and they bring the flow that is closely related to the gospel, that is closely related to the spirituals, that is closely related to the blues. When you're talking about those three entities right there, you're talking about the roots, really, frankly, of most American music, but you're definitely talking about the roots of African American music, and after slavery, you know, keeping those worlds separate. That there is no real separation between the two. The sound continued into the literature. Look at W.B. Du Bois, Souls of Black Folks, when he has quotes from spirituals at the beginning of every chapter. Look at Zora Neale Hurston in the way that she writes. Look at Langston Hughes, who was writing about the blues when it was not popular to do so, right? So that's my answer, but I ramble.
That's all good. It's just an organic conversation. Yeah, not to talk about myself, but I come from a family of musicians and artists, and that it's so nice to hear that sort of reiterated, like music fuels so much, I think, in our lives and culture, and that holds true to me. So I got a question from the audience, from our very own Julie Sheehan. She'd love to know, you guys both have a strong sense of how of using words and puns and kind of creating an inherent comedy to such strong, powerful works with, not inherently comical topics. And I just wanted to know, I guess, a little bit about that, if you could talk to that. Michelle, would you like to start?
I mean, I don't necessarily set out to, I have my own quirky sense of humor. And, sometimes I'm reading a poem and I will hear like a couple of chuckles and it surprised me because I don't necessarily think that, I don't know if it'll come across, because sometimes it's like even like a personal little like sarcasm or irony, life irony. But it's always a lot of fun when you realize that other people have sort of picked it up, because even if it's like quick, but yeah, I don't really have a real answer for that. I mean, I think the musician part, like when I was an undergraduate, I had to set a lot of poems, and think about how, instrumentation and mood, and I seem to be attracted to pieces that, like kind of what I read, like elegies and sort of these like remembrance pieces that were a little bit somber, a little bit in minor mode, instruments that reflected more of the sound of the voice or singers. So I think humor is probably very far. I was a little more attracted to this sense of the tragic parts of life, especially when I was undergrad, and history, like what Tyehimba was talking about. I was still like in this placement of awe, like these things happened. Why are we repeating them? So I think maybe anger and just sadness, and then trying to make some kind of like statement about, let's remember and let's try not to repeat these things. So yeah, I think as I got older, some of that I can lighten up a little bit and some of that humor comes through. But I think with Tyehimba's first piece, maybe talking about that process would be really interesting. I think that goes a little bit more with that, with your question. If you don't mind sharing that process.
Yeah. I share your love of a kind of a subtle wit, and I also share your observation about the tragic. There's a thin line between the tragic and the comic. And the tragic can get so tragic that it becomes comic, and then back and forth. And I think, in thinking about that poem, I think that I think my process was thinking about just, okay, what about cannibalism? Right? Because I don't want to keep it. I just don't want to be polite about, police officers that choke the life out of brothers on the street. Why don't we just take their kneecaps off and serve them to the community or something like that? I mean, of course, I'm talking in an extreme fashion, but in the poem, many extremities can, many kind of extreme conditions can exist. And then I kind of just, took it from there. But really, it's out of the urge to not revisit the same subject in the same way, because let's be honest. I could have written what? How many police murder poems could I have written in 2020? I don't even know. It's at least over 100. I don't know. So after a while, it gets rote, ROTE, and you get, it's like, oh, here we go, another. So, so in lieu of feeling like that, I just decided to take it all the way over into another territory. And I think it is comic, but it also is tragic in many ways. Uh, so I think something to really think about is that you know laughter, comedy is something that all people have under almost all situations.
Hmm.
Okay, to help them get through the 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 tragedy of life that they're living, and that is part of human beings survival mechanism is to divert the mind from thinking about how terrible it is by finding some little tiny slice of humor in it. Look at Sterling Brown when he was writing about segregation in the South, and he has this poem. He has this poem where it becomes illegal in this little tiny town in Mississippi or wherever uh, for Black people to laugh out loud in the street. So they set up this laughing booth. So you can only laugh if you're Black inside this little telephone booth size laughing booth. And there's a line around the corner with Black folks just trying to hold it in so they can get in the laughing booth. I wish I had it with me. I'd read it. But that is an example of 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 putting the extremities or the really frankly the everyday horror of living under segregation, you know, under a comic lens, so that we can really see the level at which control was exercised and desired by the white supremacist forces in the South. Here's the humor. You don't know what's in this glass. I'm just kidding.
It's the afternoon, right? At least on the East Coast. I think in addition, I wanted to just point out also with the American Dream Diner, hitting that sort of anger with the words that we use for food is just so visceral and so aggressive. It can be, and you can just like feel it. So that's just my little takeaway. Kind of shifting gears, how this is a question from the audience, Elub Salvador. How do you know when a poem is finished? Or I guess I'll expand it to how do you know when a work is finished?
Well, this is because Julie's out there. She knows, like, I'm a reviser. I revise it takes me a long time to finish. But I like puzzles, and I typically have sort of the poem version, and then I have the prose version. So where I'm writing out, it helps me to stay on track of where I think this poem is going. But part of the beauty of the process is I don't always know where the poem is going to land me, and I like that. Not all poets are like that. I'm not saying they're like I don't know, they plot everything out, but I'm not one of those poets. I like to take risks. I like to see where my psyche, I don't know, I'd like to go on a journey with my psyche during sort of the writing process. And I'm just as surprised probably by the audience, as the audience hears where I end up, which is a sort of humor. But yeah, I think I want to say I hear a literal like pie bell, like a little oven bell, like it's like ding, that's done. It's kind of like that, it's like you get this feel like I shouldn't touch it anymore for a time. or put it aside. I think I asked this question to like Yusuf Komanyaka, and he's like, he puts it in the folder, puts it away, and then come back to it. So I think it's just an ongoing process. Is any poem ever done? I don't know. Even if it ends up being published, sometimes maybe a year later, 5 years later, you read it and you see something new and you might alter a line. That's okay. It's your poem. So I think it's, for me, it's always a living, you know, sort of entity on the page. And but there is some, at some point, where if you do want to send it off, you gotta like stop the process and send it off. Let other people, give them time to sort of reflect on it, and then you know, kind of take it from there. Endings are hard for a lot of poets as beginnings. So, and sometimes when you're kind of in love with a poem, you don't want to let it go, right? I don't know. What do you think, Tyehimba? Are you similar? Or?
Well, oddly enough, once I also asked Yusef Kominyaka
Mm-hmm.
how to end a poem.
What did he say?
He said in his accent, I can't do his accent. He has the most amazing voice.
He does.
He has
Absolutely.
like the best voice for poetry reading. At any rate, he said something along the lines. You know, a lot of times, yeah, the ending should be a few lines up from where you actually ended.
That's true.
And I think what that made me pay attention to was the idea of putting too fine a point on a poem. I mean, sometimes you just want to land it and stick it, but other times you kind of want to. You don't want to. You don't want to be heavy-handed in the end. You know. But I would also concur with much of what you said, which is, you know, you revise and you revise, and then you step back away from it, and you come back a few weeks later, and you may see a few things that you want to tinker with, and or you may change the order of the stanzas or whatever. You know, whatever you need to do to get to that, to pick the combination or to get the vibe or to, you know, arise the spirits in the poem that you feel necessary. And then you step away from it again and then come back. And for me, it's after I say, you know what, man, I'm done. I can't do nothing. I can't. I done looked at this doggone poem like for like 2 years. Can't do no more. You're gonna have to get out of my house. Get out of my house and earn your own keep in a journal somewhere. Walk around the world. Let people read you and interact with you, and you do the work in their minds and blah blah blah. And you know, if I don't change my mind by the time the book is done, then it goes in the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah, there is like, I don't have children, and so I've never had to send children off to college, but it is a little bit like, okay, let me just send this off and let it find its own home
Right.
for a while. Yeah.
Another one, author John Edgar Wyman, you know, said something that stuck with me. Is that, you know, part of the difference between, well, this is an ugly word that I have to bring up. It's called professionalism. Okay, but it's a reality, and part of the difference between doing like putting work out in the world, that's called being that's called publishing, and that's a professional move. Part of what that means is you write it, you let it go into the world, and you let it go. And at that moment, you're saying, "This is the best that I can do at this moment." That's it. I mean, this is me leaving everything on the table, like not leaving nothing on the field, so to speak, and putting it all into this poem. And this is where I am at this moment. And then you have to walk past it in order to get to the next thing that you then put out into the world and say the same thing. You know, that's how that works.
Yeah. And I agree that I think like, you know, reading through a lot of poems as like an editor, I find that the poem does end before we get to the end. And, even we'll take a poem, accept a poem for publishing, and we'll give the poet or the author that option. Like, what do you think about this? And I would say 95% of the times they're like, oh yeah, I see that. Because they were just trying to summarize the whole poem in those last 2 lines. Right. Even the new poem I read, the Body Politic, I'm still not like, it's a long word to end on admonishment. Not everybody's going to understand that. So I'm like, do I want to leave people there? But it feels right to the poem. Right. But maybe there's another word down the line. See, like next week, I'll be like, oh, in the shower, it'll just like come up.
That's when that would happen. You ain't got no pen or nothing. You in the shower.
That's right.
Like, oh, let me hold on to that till I get out the shower.
That's great. Shower thoughts are real. The magic of the shower. Mm-hmm. So we talked a little bit about ending. I was hoping we could talk a little bit about beginnings before we end. How do you start something? Where do you draw inspiration? If you're stuck, where do you go to push through? Can you speak to that at all?
Well, I would only say that the most important thing is to start. That's really, in a lot of ways, that's the hardest thing. Because if the poem be looking all really, really tight up in here, but the challenge is to get it from here all the way down your arm into the pen and onto the page. And that's where all the mess ups happen. You have this perfect idea. Yeah, it's like this. And then But the good thing about at least getting something on the page, period, is that you can always come back and revise, no matter what. So even if you just scribble for a whole page or whatever, what you're doing is you're I say what I'm doing is I'm getting rid of, I'm just throwing ideas around, and then eventually, like, I kind of hit pay dirt. And then I start going into something that is along the lines of what I'm really interested in. Yeah. Mm. And always remember, 1 is greater than 0. It's better to have one thing on the page than nothing.
That's so true. I spent many years trying, I'm going to say the word trying to write music, right? So, and that process was, just very involved. And it even, needed other people involved. Like if I'm writing a piece for, say, the clarinet, a lot of times I'd have to go to a clarinet player and be like, is this note too high? Does this make sense? Does gesture make sense? Do you think you could do that? Like, no, nobody can do that. Only like a digital computer can do that. So then I have to like sort of rethink. So that process was really hard all the time, I felt, even though I was engaged in the challenge of it. But with words or poems, like I was really okay with messing up, like just, I'm going to call messing, like playing, like almost pushing my hand into different paints and just saying, let me just try all of this. Some people don't want to get their hands dirty. I'm not that person. So I would actually recommend, well, I'll tell you what worked for me, like turning the screen down blank. This is what I got from some teachers when I was like in my 20s. And just kind of typing everything that comes to my psyche. It doesn't even have to be about the day. It could be anything, and don't read it. I would do that like 5 o'clock in the morning, and I do that before I go to bed. And that just it became like a sort of self-discipline for many years. And then maybe the next day I would revisit it and see if there were any lines that I liked, and I'd pull them out. And that might be the catalyst, not necessarily the start of the poem, but the catalyst to just start thinking about, pushing out a poem or form or structure. But again, this is the word process. Like I enjoyed like figuring it out. I'm assuming like I don't know, people who like to put together cars and take them apart, or people like take apart computers and put them together. That's a little too much for me. But like with poems, that's what I like to do. When I read, I like to do that too. Like, so if I'm reading Olio, you know, I'd be looking at different poems. How can he put that together like that? Or, you know, why did he start with this particular poem? You know, and it's not, you know, start a book with this particular poem. You know, I like inquiry in that way. And so I tend to do that, you know, with my own work and process. So I would just say, you know, you just got to develop your own style and don't be afraid to put it on the page, however it shows up. If you think you're a more auditory person, then tape record it, you know, tape record something that might be the start or it might get you started, and then type it down or something like that. But there's all different kinds of ways. So yeah. And in terms of inspiration, like, I don't know, life inspires me. So it's just whatever is on my mind. It could be sort of the politics we were talking about. I actually get a little frustrated if I really, like, I have this poem to Breonna Taylor. I might have shared with Julie and Ama Kojo, for those you know. And I just kept, like, I really wanted to say something, like, really so angry. That's a rarity for me. Like, when I really just want to speak directly to something because I'm just so disgusted. But it didn't seem like any of the versions was like, I would start it and I would start it again. And it wasn't saying what I wanted to say. It wasn't saying what it was probably something bothering me even deeper, you know? So I'm not ready for that poem. I tried, I started over and over and over, but maybe like next year, you know, it will come, you know? So I'll just keep, like what we're talking about, I'm just gonna keep revising, keep trying different places to start, you know? So, yeah.
Thank you. I think we're coming up on the end of our little session. Michelle and Tyehimba, you dropped so many nuggets of gems of knowledge and inspiration and advice. But if you had any last words for maybe our undergrads and graduate students who are, you know, working on their own poetry.
Don't stop. I would say that, you know, I started writing with a whole lot of people back in the open mic days. I'm talking early 90s. And I would say out of those 30, no, no, say 70, 80 people, I can think of 3 that are still doing it right now. And, you know, it's just what we have been called to do. And if you really, 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 really want it, then, you know, you can, what's that saying? Do what you love and the money will follow. I agree with that somewhat. The only caveat is you have to put 10,000% of yourself into it, in it for any of that, you know, money to follow.
I super excited for, I can't see you all out there, but I'm just really excited that you found this call, right, to want to write and express yourself. I recommend reading others who've come before you. Why? Because you'll get ideas. You'll get ideas about form. You'll get ideas about structure, or you'll just get ideas about conversation. What you know, what has gone on in life before you entered the scene. Every so often, I get a student who thinks they're inventing and not to burst that bubble. You are inventing something in that time and space, but these 20 other people were doing that. So what do you think about that in the 60s? What do you think about that in the, you know, it's a dialogue. You have entered now into this canon, this dialogue, your voice matters. And I would try to find mentors or people who are still living that's what musicians do, right? You try your best to pass down something that you think is useful, and what Tyehimba said about community, I found in my 20s the Long Island community really supportive. There were a lot of readings that I can choose from. And even if it was, sometimes people didn't really understand what I was writing, but they listened, they took time, they were patient. So in this pandemic time, there are so many virtual readings out there. People are like, have things been slow for you? I haven't necessarily been reading throughout the whole year, at a like warp speed, but I've been busy online, like supporting people, just in the virtual like writing community. And feel free to like ask anybody in your program, Julie, or graduate students, even like where are they involved, and yeah, and just try to enjoy. There's a lot of summer programs too where you can do like a little bit of a retreat to just focus on you if you can afford to do that. Sometimes that's a little pricey, but yeah, I would just say take a lot of time for yourself, walk, listen, observe. That's a big part of it, and try to be brave.
Thank you. That's real. That's real. Tyehimba, Michelle, thank you so much for sharing with us today. I know I'm super inspired. I'm supposed to go back to, virtual work now. I'm not ready for that. That 9 to 5. But thank you so much. Thank you to Stony Brook for hosting this. Frank, thank you for monitoring, managing the technological side of this. And Molly, thank you for curating this series.
Thanks, y'all, for bringing me through. Great hanging with you, Michelle.
Yes, wonderful to see you again and hear your work. I'm excited.
Yeah.
And thank you again, Frank and Molly. You're the best. And Arianna, you just kind of lit up the place and made us feel very welcome. Thanks. So thank you.